Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I'm Coach Em and today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Dr. Damien Taylor, who is a senior leadership specialist, consultant, researcher, actually just an all-round good guy from my great friend Hanan, who referred him. He has a really diverse skill set, not only in helping senior leaders with practices like purpose, strategy, and organizational leadership. He's also still an athlete himself, being the Australian Oceania World Champion in natural bodybuilding, and so much more to do with leadership excellence. I love, Damien, that you bring both the sport and the business perspective into this conversation today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited and I appreciate you having me, and it's a real honour to be part of it. It's an interesting, diverse mix that I've got for both the corporate and military and special operations force, but also the sport side of things and coaching and participation as an athlete. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always love a pattern break question, and I always go with my intuition on these, Damien. So the first one, I'm going to say, if natural bodybuilding was a colour, what colour would it be?
I think it changes colour along the way, because sometimes it's red, it can be painful. It'll give you a green colour at the end of it and a blue throughout, that you really be going in the zone. So I would say it's multi-tiered rather than just one.
All right, let's go there first. The zone. Now, even the myth of the zone is something I think, to demystify the zone. So what is it when you're in it, and is it easily accessible to all?
It's a very interesting question, and the zone or the flow state that others might call it. And it's hard to describe when you're in it, because at some stages, whether it be tennis or football or whatever sport that you're playing, for some reason you can't do anything wrong. You're just in the moment and you're letting your instinct, your intuition take over. And it feels like the ball's coming to you whether you want it or not, or things are just happening whether you want them or not. It's just flowing. And you just can't do anything wrong, it feels like. At other stages, you feel clunky and you can't get anything right. You say, wow, it's not my day. And you begin to overthink, and you let your thoughts of, am I doing this right? How's my form? Am I approaching it right? Am I standing it right? Just feeling a bit off. So the mind starts taking over rather than trusting yourself, trusting that you've done the work, and allowing yourself just to be in that flow state and be where your feet are and participate. So that overthinking can really, really be your worst thing. If you're prepared as much as you can't control the periphery things. It'll be the results of byproduct. So the more you can allow and accept that you've done the work and be in that moment, I think the more obtainable flow state is. You can't get there all the time. It is a beautiful thing when you're there, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, my sport of tennis growing up, if I asked, in the course of 12 months, how many matches did you feel like you were in flow state? It's usually less than two hands. So that's
I agree. Yeah.
The other thing that I think is important, because it's easy to look at these people, especially the Australian Open's on right now, and think, wow, everything happens so easily and effortlessly. But so often that actually isn't the case. And
yeah. Did you feel, if someone asked you if you were in the flow state of that game and what it felt like, could you articulate it well? It's not something easy to tell others. What would your thoughts be?
I totally agree with that, because sometimes when you're in it, you don't know until after the event as well. So it's like I love the feeling I actually had recently with a presentation. And when I was presenting, I was in flow state so much that I was almost I had an out of body experience, like looking down on myself, watching myself present and
Yes. Yeah.
interacting with the audience. So I could feel that in the moment, but I couldn't describe it till after the situation. But I can't tell you the last time during a keynote that I felt that. It's probably at least 8 months since I felt that. So I think that just to demystify it, it's attainable, it's accessible to everybody. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so much of it is about the preparation, isn't it? Like if you've done
Very much
everything you
so. Yeah.
can, then it's about trusting the outcome. Is there anything else you want to share on that?
Well, and where does that trust come from? The trust comes from the honesty to yourself that you've done the preparation, you've done the work. So integrity is a word that's used a lot, but integrity for me is honesty plus trust. So your actions speak the loudest. So if you're being honest to yourself and prepared well and done the work, then you gain that trust that, hey, just go out there and play. And just to build on that a little bit more, if someone said, well, just do what you did last time, it's very hard to describe what you did last time because that would I go back to, I trusted myself that I'd done the preparation for whether a keynote, prepared really well, did notes, and I didn't even really need my notes. It just evolved as I was going. So I think we both agree it's around that preparation, work ethic and honesty to yourself that you've ticked all the boxes before you go and do whatever the event is that you're doing.
All right. Well, let's talk about the opposite of flow state. Let's talk about where you're not in the zone and nothing's coming easily, yet you still find a way to win or you find a way to get an outcome, even in business. Things keep going wrong. Talk to me about, I know you've got a background in multiple sports, not just the natural bodybuilding right now, but the rugby, tennis, AFL background. This concept of resiliency, I think, was a bit of a buzzword, like maybe even 2 years ago. Run the Resilience Project and all these things were there about bouncing back, which I eloquently reframed to bounce forward. But I still think it is very important to talk about that concept when things are not going well. And what are your thoughts with your background in being a multi-sport athlete at such a high level yourself? What are your thoughts on what do you do in that situation?
Well, if we look at the conversation we just had on flow state, and we both agree that flow state doesn't happen that often. So how most of the time, the things that you're talking about now of how do you grind out a win? How do you get that grit, that resilience that you're talking about? And that I'm sure when you're on the circuit, the difference between skill sets of the top of the 100th player to the first player is small percentages. It's actually not that big. But what is a determining factor often is the ability of consistency to keep doing the same thing over and over, understanding that it's not quite working yet, but I'll work myself into it. Just keep working hard. And what are the little things I can do differently? So, for example, I played a lot of Australian rules football. And sometimes no matter what you're doing, the ball, you can't get your hands on the ball at particular times. But what can I do? I can block shepherd, I can tackle people, I can get myself involved and eventually work in instead of having the mindset it's just not my day. And that's where you see the difference with people. They hit the negative switch and go, nothing's working. It's just not my day, and their effort reflects that mindset. So I think that the really strong and good, consistent performers say it's not particularly my day, I'm not hitting flow state, but what are the little things, the little percentage wins? What's the next step, next point, next thing? What can I work on? Just chip away, and you grind yourself through. And often you can reflect on those more as a real fill up for when things aren't going well. Yes, I can just grind, just get to the next point. Don't overthink the end. Be in the moment each step along the way.
Okay. thank you for sharing that. Great advice, and especially start of 2025. There's no shortcuts, is there really? So talk to me about your research. You've got this wonderful PhD at the end of your name. We've kicked off this episode talking about really the art of performance. Talk to me about the science of your research that perhaps supports some of these concepts or not, in terms of what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It's fascinating, particularly. So I'm a leadership specialist, consultant and researcher. And when I was looking at my PhD study, for instance, I was looking at the lack of women high-performance coaches in sport. And the numbers are still really poor. They're less than 15% representation around the world. And that's another subject we could touch on. But there've been a lot of decades of research on barriers for women and different things that were quite exhaustive, but no one had looked at the practices in depth of senior leaders to attract, develop, and retain women high-performance coaches. So what are CEOs doing, directors, chairs, etc., around those things? And that started a real fascination for me on how do people make decisions, because the leaders make decisions that they're going to affect individuals, they're going to affect teams, they're going to affect organisations, the culture, the social environment. So my work really looks at how a decision's formed by people, and then how does that form behaviour. So I've deep dived for the last couple of years researching leaders from segments all over the world, over 150, nearly up to 160, and it really comes down to values and the ecosystems that form those values, because your values become your radar, your ethical and moral radar, and they form your beliefs, which form your behaviours. And all the ecosystems as we grow and develop, so it might be early days as parents and siblings and extended family, it might be religion, your school, and then as we grow, sport's really important. For ourselves, when you're growing up, you have some coaches that are great, some that instill bad habits. Are the parents' values great values? You don't really know, but they're really strong within you, and then those ecosystems form as you go out into the world and work and whatever it may be. But really understanding those values when you plug in. So if we take that back to a performance perspective, what's inside of you? You're constantly making decisions, and leadership is about being situational specific. Everything's different. You haven't been, if you were playing someone before, you say, just do what you did last time. Well, it's different court, it's different conditions, it's different this, different that. So I really look at how values are formed, and they form your radar, but they really affect your behaviour and your decisions out there, which can go back to those other things as we're expanding of how you hold yourself out on the court. Have you got a victim mentality? It's just not my day, it's not going right. Or what ecosystems and values you've got in you, just dig, just chip away, just get through. I love challenges. This is great. I'm going to have to grind that out. So I know it's a long-winded answer. Hopefully it got where you want to get, but really understanding where decisions come from, how they're made, what they do, and what are the results of those as such for other people really affects well-being and individual, team, organisational psychology.
What can a person in leadership do today, right now, to support? We have to do a better job than less than 15% of women coaches. So it's such a passion. This is a passion area and topic of mine for many years, and I've been involved the last few years in supporting women in coaching. So what is something that can be done immediately? So I love the values piece. Of course, I live and breathe that. But what's something they can do immediately with regards to this decision making, which happens to be practice one of my book in the world's best coaches? What do they all do well? Practice one is decision making. So what's a practical tool or something that they can do today that can help shift the dial 1%?
It's a great question. When I'm doing workshops or keynotes, I make them interactive. And for leaders, it's not very often that the mirror gets turned on them immediately. And I say, what are your values? What are your really strong values, that they become triggers to you? Because we tell leaders to want to listen and absorb differing opinions, but not many can actually do that by understanding their values, to say, these are trigger points for me. This is really going to push my boundaries, but I've got to understand those boundaries so I can listen and absorb the differing opinions, because that's how we learn and grow. So a lot of leaders profess that they're open-minded and like hearing different things, but they actually don't when their values are challenged. So if you ask the leader immediately, put down your top 5 values and tell me your purpose as a leader. And your purpose is not what you do and how you'll do it. Your purpose is why you're there as a leader. And just to follow on with that, we use buzzwords as a servant leader, authentic leader. I don't think that they can be the overarching message of leadership. So to come full circle to answer your question, you've really got to understand your values, because they're trigger points, and they can switch you off, and you're already making decisions based on those rather than sitting in the moment and listening. Authentic leadership and servant leadership, being authentic is only a small part of leadership, and so is being of service, because you also have to be autocratic. You've got to be dictatorial. You've got to be empathetic. You've got to be tolerant. You've got to be able to put your arm around. You've got to know when to push back. So leadership is not a word of such, be this sort of leader, this sort of leader. It's an overarching of all those principles, which comes back down to the values and really understanding yourself.
Everything begins with self-awareness, doesn't it?
It really does. And if you're like old school philosophy, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, all that, it was all about learning and questioning yourself to learn more about the world. But women's coaching is a passion for both of us, particularly in high performance. And the needle's not changing. We're over-educating women coaches, and it's great to have all these programs for women coaches. We've got a lot of very educated women coaches, but the numbers are still less than 15% worldwide. So we've got to start looking at these senior leaders, the CEOs, the directors and chairs, because they're still using excuses of our stakeholders aren't ready to see a woman coach. And it really drives me nuts that surely we want to see the best leaders in sport. The gender is irrelevant. If you meet or exceed the skills, it's up to the leaders to drive that message through to their stakeholders to say we've got the best leader involved. Until we start changing that conversation, then we'll start seeing the needle change.
Why did you start studying this? What was your why?
My why was I was mentoring, and I still mentor a woman coach she's doing fantastic job in the NCAA at the moment. She's a national volleyball coach, but I was mentoring a couple of women coaches, and I was specialising in women's strength and condition training as well, because I don't want to jump across. Coaching women is completely different to coaching men, or leading women or leading men, because it's nuances and differences, and we go on it. But I was mentoring 2 women coaches who wanted to get into high performance coaching, and they couldn't get a role. And it really, I couldn't understand it. Knowing them, they were terrific communicators. They knew that they were over-educated, all the things, and they couldn't get in. And I was, why? Why is this the case? So I really started to look at the situation. I was doing a Masters of Sport Business and Integrity at that stage because of my corporate background and merging into sport. So that's where I started going, wow, this is a real problem. And that's why, and that merged into my PhD. So it was working with women, and I still do coach and mentor both in business and in high performance sport of this. And I'm trying to deliver these messages and keynotes and things around the world to help change.
So you have this military side and background as well. So I want to basically just sort of shift gears slightly, because you did mention that, the nuances of coaching men, coaching women, the differences there. So the military, obviously, you could make an assumption that they're very traditional, very direct, very do this, do that,
Hierarchy. Yeah,
hierarchy,
absolutely. Yeah.
etc. So, and now let's talk about coaching, because I mean, just as a backstory, quick backstory, is that the CEO of Open Door Coaching, Natalie Ashdown, who co-authored my book, incredible woman, her company Open Door Coaching actually just qualified 800 of the Australian Air Force leaders to become workplace coaches, and then
Oh, wow.
within that, those coaches are now they're running leader as coach in-house programs. So now the numbers it's up, it's thousands, right, of people having this coaching mentality, which is of course bringing out that which lives within. So the Australian Air Force seeing the value of coaching in their business. What was your experience with the military? And of course, I'm assuming there would have been men and women, and the nuances there with as it relates to coaching. Did that make sense?
No, it does, and it's a brilliant question. It's something that I've really had some robust conversations with military and then going into corporate, because often, say it's ex-SAS commanders, for example, finish their career and their service and go into keynote speaking or corporate consulting on what is great leadership. And in the military, there is a hierarchy, and there is the presence of giving you a command, of giving you an order. So you may question it, but to a certain point, you can push back and say, because I'm the boss, because I've got this badge, you need to do what I've said. And sometimes don't question me. Now, yes, we can do that in coaching, but that becomes very difficult building a relationship. So they're very well drilled, very well instructed, very informed, and they're great leaders. And some of the situations I've talked to military about when they're on a capture and kill mission and there's bullets flying everywhere and you're losing people, and I won't digress into that for you, but you need really strong, great leadership then, and that's often when these great leaders have come to the forefront and just taking control. But if you pull and extract that out and put it into corporate or sports coaching with the military background, you have to take people in coaching, whether it's a team or corporate, on a journey. You have to take them and give them purpose of, we would like you to do this, we need you to do this, and this is the importance of you doing this as part of the team together. We'll go on this journey to reach this particular point. So military have got an objective. We're going to do this and we need to get that done. Let's do it. It is similar in sport. We want to try and win a championship, but the championship's a byproduct of everything you do along that journey, and you have to give people that purpose and understanding that their role in that is of benefit and they feel recognised and validated through doing it. So whilst it's similar, it's very different in the military, that you've signed on to go through your ranks, and my rank is this, my rank is that, and I'll be told to do something and I have to do it, whether I particularly like it or not, and that could be the commander. But you go into corporate with that attitude and you say, I've told you to do it, do it. It's like, get lost, or I'm leaving. Yeah, a lot of people, I don't like this leader. I'm leaving. I'm sick of this place. So it's a very nuanced difference when the long-time military commanders come out and go into a corporate environment and they don't last particularly long. So people aren't doing what I've asked them to do. It's not an order anymore. It's a choice. So that's why it's very different in leadership and coaching.
What do you think makes a great coach in 1 to a maximum of 3 words?
Emotional intelligence, understanding purpose. There's 2 others, presence and presence.
I'd love you to talk about the future of coaching as you see it, and how those 3 words fit into potentially your response.
Emotional intelligence, I get asked, what's the most important thing about leadership or coaching? emotional intelligence, from all the work I've done, all the research I've done, far outweighs anything else. Because without the ability to build connection, to build relationships, to read the room, to read the situation, we hear about, that coach is fantastic, wear their heart on the sleeve. I would argue completely against that, because you can have react and respond, react really inappropriately, and then have to spend the rest of the week apologising, and often you can lose the group. So having that emotional intelligence to understand this person isn't quite performing, but do I need to ask them, are you okay? Is something happening in your life that's affecting this? Not you've been crap at training today. Your effort was terrible. So emotional intelligence, number one, understanding your purpose. Your purpose isn't being your how and what. Your purpose is all of those encompassing autocratic, dictatorial, being tolerant, empathetic, removing barriers for people. You're not the finger pointer. You're removing the barriers for everyone else to make their job or their training as easy as possible. Being present, that's something that's really not looked at enough. So we're having a conversation, we're engaged with each other, we're listening, absorbing, asking questions and engaging. But often you can go to a leader and they're not engaged. You're looking at the phone, I call them the yeah, mate, boss, yep. And you're just not listening. And your presence, you look dishevelled, you haven't brushed your hair, your uniform's terrible, you're asking everyone to look professional, but you're not, you look tired, etc., etc. So your presence really sets the tone for everyone else. And your presence, how you carry yourself. You're that angry, they're an angry coach. So your presence, are you approachable? Can you have conversations? Do people feel safe? Are you creating that safe environment to listen to other opinions, or you don't want to listen? So those things are so important to coaches and leadership that we don't talk about enough. We look at results too much. We look at what's happening on the ladder or how many championships someone has won. But if you can get those things right, and that is where the women leaders that I've worked with, the really good ones, are teaching me so much about the value of emotional intelligence and reading the room.
Wonderful. So good. Do you have a quick tip on how to get yourself present as a coach right before you've just had a whole bunch of personal stuff go down and now you're about to step into a meeting or you're about to lead a group of people? How do you get present?
2 words: situational specific. Everything you do. So what happened in the last meeting is not what's going to happen in the next meeting, and it's no one else's problem. You're there for another particular situation. If you had an argument with your partner, your kids, or whatever on the way to work, that is not anyone else's problem when you walk in the door, and you have never seen everything every time. Look, you played, as we talked about before, you played this person before, big deal. Different court, different conditions, and when do you the same? So understanding the things are situational specific and go in and be where your feet are. Be present in the moment. Don't preconceive that they're going to say this, I'm going to say that, because sometimes the person doesn't even turn up, or the meeting doesn't happen, etc., or it doesn't go the way it is. So preconceived ideas, no, we've all got ideas and we can challenge during the meeting, but be where your feet are and be in the moment more.
I really love, you've said that 3 times now. Be where your feet are. I like that too, because from as long as I can remember as a coach, the minute the feet stop in tennis, then things do not bear well.
Exactly. You're stuck in the concrete, and then you sink really, really quickly. Heraclitus is an old philosopher, but he said no man steps in the same river twice. So you can be looking at the same thing all the time and think you've seen it, but hey, it's different currents, it's different depths. There might be different there's rocks underneath the surface you didn't know. So being where your feet are, present in that moment without preconceived ideas that I know it all, I've seen it, or we're going to do this. Just open your mind up a bit more.
And let's reframe that. No person steps in the river twice.
Anyway, yes.
Because of our women in leadership. All right.
Yeah.
let's talk about technology, the use of technology in coaching.
Yes.
As it relates to the quality of teaching. And I know that you really believe in the foundation of technical development. So sort of three concepts there. Could you bundle them together as how you view the use of technology in teaching and coaching?
Yeah, technology is a big part of it. It's going to be bigger with AI. Really a big focus on the tech companies. The big tech companies are focusing on that now. Technology's been a fantastic tool for coaching and leadership to really understand what we did well in particular moments, and we can pull that apart for each other. We can have them as aids during training. You know, what's our heart rate? What's our energy? And then other tools, sleep aids and all those things, So there's just so many great tools around there, but there can also be so many tools around there that we're losing our perspective on looking at too much data and not getting back to reaching those flow states and understanding that we've done the work and the skills. So I'm all for technology, but I think we need to now strike the balance of how much we're using and analyse why we're using it. Is this really a good tool? Yeah, look, we want to do our performance measurements, our fitness, our VO2 max, and all those strength and conditioning things we can talk about. But are we actually over-analysing and over-complicating and putting too much data in our athletes' heads that, well, am I pushing off the right foot? Have I got the right coach? Sometimes you need to, as you would have got, just go out and play. Just go and trust yourself. So I think for the leaders, great tool. Question how much data you're looking at and why. Are you just wanting to keep ahead of the game, saying, look what we're using now, rather than asking it differently, what benefit is this bringing? And look over the last 12 months, what benefit has it brought? Has this really been a change for us, or is this spending a lot of time on 0% change of our performance?
And the last guest I had on my show was saying that we've lost our ability to really focus on the technical side of the development. We're good at running activities. We're good at the broader picture, and we've lost a bit of sight of that, making sure you've got the foundations right. What's your take on that, especially with your multi-sport background?
I tend to agree. If you look at a lot of the professional sports now, a lot of the coaches are looking at screen, and they're looking at last play and what happened. But if I was coaching, say, Australian rules football, and it might not be familiar to a lot of your audience, it's a crazy game we play over here in Australia. But if you touch the ball over a 120-minute game and you touch the ball 40 times, it's been less than 90 seconds in your hand in control. So the rest of there'd be 118 minutes, say, that you're not touching the ball. So what are you doing? And we've lost that art of teaching people to think about positioning, to think about what they're doing for others, and that be of service that we talked about. How is your performance, how is your effort being of service to the team and to being others? So those nuances, we're getting away from doing things like that and teaching the skills of what you can do. Am I in the way? Should I be out of the way? Am I anticipating where am I placing myself? Can I support them instead of give me the ball where it is? Or looking at data all the time. So yes, we've lost that art form, I think, of coaching, that we're too much driven on the technology and not getting back to those foundational base level teaching skills of this person's going there, you go over there, sacrifice you there. So we need to get back to some of those fundamentals. I watch a lot of, my son plays some reasonable level football at under 19 level, and that's something I concentrate on of what they're doing. They're wanting to see the coaches and leaders around the competitions as up with technology, but I watch and I say, well, you're not teaching some of these fundamentals of the sport, the good habits that you drag through all the way, and then you can teach those other nuances as you get older.
Awesome. So to round it off then, let's go back to business. Let's go back to corporate front-end leadership skills. What sort of, to land the plane, so to speak, of this episode, what's your best sort of top tips for business coaches, people in leadership management positions? First of all, what is a front-end leadership skill? What do you mean by that? And what perhaps finish with just a couple of practical tools for them to walk away with as well.
This is my warehouse. This is where I have real fun with the front-end leadership. And front-end leadership, I mean, a lot of the coaching and consulting that's done for people that come into a business is to fix leadership that's broken. Fix things are broken. We don't teach leaders about that decision-making, how you're making the decision, how it's affecting. We put values out as an organisation. These are our values. This is our vision. This is our mission. But do we really believe that within ourselves? Are they values that we have? So when I talk about front-end leadership, if we understand our values and those trigger points, we're trying to get that word culture that brought up a lot. If we don't understand our culture, how can we portray that other culture to everyone else in the organisation? Is it a fit, or can I fit within it? Or is it a magnet pushing each other apart? So when I teach these workshops, I get the leaders to understand themselves, so then they can really collectively integrate together on the organisational values and beliefs, articulate them as one unit. Because when I first asked everyone else, if there's 8 people in the room, for instance, what's your purpose and what's the values of the organisation, I get 8 different answers. When you understand yourself, then understand the organisational values, you articulate that together and you take the organisation on a journey as one, rather than different managers, different leaders going this way and that way, and it's disjointed. So that front-end leadership really ties that in well, individually, collectively, then you take each other on a journey.
So if my values are not aligned with the company's values, what do I do then?
You really have to question, can you work within that framework? Is that something that's going to challenge me constantly, that's going to push against me, that I'm not going to be able to perform at my optimum and I'm not going to enjoy what I'm doing? Or am I putting too much of my value and weight on this, where I have to acquiesce around these things and I can really add benefit through my service in these areas, which is what I'm there to do. So they are measures, as we said, that ethical and moral radar, but you've got your culture and the organisation's got yours, and they've got it. They're different ecosystems, but can I fit within that and perform my optimum? If really the answer keeps coming back at no, then yeah, you have to extract yourself and go, you're not going to enjoy yourself, you're not going to be a benefit to others, and that purpose and presence, and are you present? It's not going to be there.
All right. Well, we have been on a journey in this conversation, Damien. I loved it. Remember, everybody, how can we be where our feet are so that we can practice authentic servant leadership based on our values? Remember, purpose is your why, not your what and your how. And at the end of the day, less than 15% female coaches. What can we all do to increase that number? What decisions can we make? How can we be aware of our subconscious bias? Turn the mirror on ourselves with emotional intelligence, purpose, and presence. Damien, thank you so much for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Oh, it's an honour. I loved it. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And everybody, thanks for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.